The relatives could not stop replaying it. The accident happened while the girl's parents were on their way to pick her up from preschool. She was only 5, and every adult in that room felt the same crushing truth. No child that young should have to bear a loss like this. Surrounded by grown-ups, the little girl sat in silence, too stunned to understand how completely her world had just changed. When someone called out, "Miyu-shan," she looked up uneasily, like she was already beginning to wonder if she had been left all alone. A heavy tension swallowed the room as the family finally faced the question no one wanted to touch. Who would take her in? One by one, the relatives pulled back, saying they had children, aging parents, no spouse, or simply no way to raise her. And when someone muttered that sending her to an orphanage would seem heartless, the entire table went still, because no one could argue with that. That was when Shizuno Mizushima rose to her feet and said she would take the girl in herself. Even when others protested that she had only just started working and could not possibly mean it, Shizuno Mizushima never wavered. She said it plainly, Miyu was her sister's child, so she would raise her. Miyu-chan looked up at Shizuno Mizushima in surprise as the whole room waited for what would come next. Then, with quiet gentleness, Shizuno Mizushima asked if Miyu-chan would like to come live with her aunt. Another relative, Ayako, admitted that living alone felt lonely, and even Miyu-chan could see that loneliness on her face. That was all it took. Miyu-chan brightened and answered with a small smile. Later, the story jumped ahead as Miyu rushed outside that morning calling for her mother. The narration introduced Katsuragi Ayako as a work-from-home mother in her 30s, hurrying Miyu to finish breakfast before Takini arrived, while Miyu insisted she had already tried to wake her. Ayako explained that she and Takini usually split up at the station, but he still came to pick Miyu up every day, even after she told him he did not have to. With a teasing smile, Ayako hinted there was an obvious reason he kept doing that, and she clearly thought Miyu was the only one not seeing it. The narration introduced Katsuragi Miyu as a first-year high school student, and Miyu awkwardly brushed it off, insisting Takini was just an old friend and her tutor. Ayako leaned in right away, but Miyu pushed back just as hard, even if Ayako was clearly not buying it. Still fully in teasing mode, Ayako said she simply could not believe Takini was coming this often for no special reason. Right then, Takarazawa Takumi, the 20-year-old college student next door, arrived with a bright smile and politely greeted Ayako. Ayako welcomed Takumi in and apologized that Miyu was still eating, casually pointing out that his perfectly timed visits had become an every morning routine. Miyu watched them for a moment, hesitated, then quietly called out to Ayako. She asked if it might be time to stop using Takumi's childhood nickname, but Takumi awkwardly replied that he had already turned 20. He was not a kid anymore. Ayako right away doubled down, fussing over him, praising how grown-up he was, and teasing him until all he could do was beg her to stop. Miyu started to point out that Takumi used to be much smaller, then cut herself off, all of a sudden embarrassed by where that might lead. Ayako laughed it off and admitted old habits were hard to break, and Miyu reluctantly let the issue drop. Smiling warmly, Ayako told him he could call her Ayako now instead of Mama, because she still thought of him like a son. That one line changed the air instantly, and Takumi shut it down at once by firmly saying he was not her son. Ayako quickly switched back to his old nickname, and the tension eased a little, but Takumi still paused at the door while Miyu stood facing him in silence. Miyu hurried over, apologized for making him wait, and greeted him, though the distracted look on her face showed the awkwardness had not passed. As they headed out, Miyu casually called Ayako Mom, and Ayako sent her off with a warm reminder to stay safe. Ayako recovered quickly and reminded them they were all having dinner together that night, and both answered cheerfully, like they were trying to smooth over what had just happened. Watching Miyu leave with Takumi, Ayako kept a gentle smile on her face, but the second they were gone, that expression turned lonely. Left alone in the entryway, she felt the emptiness of the house come rushing back. She admitted to herself in a quiet voice that the house always felt painfully silent whenever she was by herself. Then, her eyes landed on Miyu's nameplate, and that tiny detail hit harder than she expected. Ayako imagined the day Miyu would get married and leave this home too, and what would remain for her after that. That fear pulled her straight back to the day she first met the little girl who had filled that emptiness. She remembered little Miyu-chan standing there all alone, and in that moment she had known she could never leave her that way. Back in the present, Ayako finished her work for the day, thanked everyone, and finally allowed herself to relax at home. Over the phone, someone praised Ayako for leading the meeting brilliantly as always, and she answered with embarrassed modesty. The atmosphere turns heavy with unspoken awareness. Ayako was stunned that so much time had already passed, and the thought landed heavier than she expected. Flustered, she apologized as Yumemi brought up how shocked she had been when Ayako all of a sudden announced she was taking in a child right after joining the company. Bowing her head again and again, Ayako gratefully told Yumemi she had supported her through that difficult time. She remembered how Yumemi had always encouraged her whenever raising Miyu became difficult, and how she helped make flexible work a reality. Yumemi replied that she simply believed employees needed an environment where they could do their best without fear. Ayako fell quiet when Yumemi gently added that, woman to woman, she had wanted to support her, because taking in her orphaned niece had never been an easy burden. Then, Yumemi abruptly changed the subject and asked how Ayako's love life was going, throwing her completely off balance. When Yumemi bluntly told her to finally find a man, Ayako nearly jolted from the pressure. Yumemi insisted love would enrich her life. But Ayako could only think that romance advice from someone still paying alimony after multiple divorces might not be the safest guidance. With a tired sigh, and the discomfort of the scene becomes impossible to ignore, Yumemi pushed back right away, pointing out that Ayako would already be in her 40s by then. She pressed once more and asked whether it was not finally time for Ayako to think about her own happiness. After the call ended, Ayako sat there in silence, staring ahead as those words refused to let her go. She told herself she could not do that, because any man she married would become Miu's stepfather, and she could not bring an outsider into their already unusual family. The interaction becomes difficult to navigate. At the party table, the guests praised Ayako's preparations, while one woman spotted a bottle in her hand and reminded her she was still underage, sparking a brief fuss over whether it was really non-alcoholic. Ayako waved off the praise and explained that her family had already put together a feast yesterday, so there was no need to thank her again. She added that they had simply gone out to eat too, then all of a sudden trailed off as another thought crossed her mind. Takumi smiled and admitted he would much rather eat her home cooking. That one comment made Ayako light up, and she warmly praised Takumi while he happily kept eating. Watching him, Ayako started imagining how perfect it would be if Miu married a boy exactly like him. Her thoughts jumped straight to a wedding fantasy, and she excitedly wondered why Miu did not just marry him already. In her mind, Takumi had everything. Kind, hard-working, handsome, and headed toward a bright future. Then she imagined an even better ending. If Miu joined his family, they would still be right next door, and she would not have to be lonely either. Completely won over by her own logic, Ayako decided the match had nothing but advantages. While Ayako happily imagined that the two of them already liked each other, Takumi teased that he would double Miu's homework next time, and Miu grumbled that her tutor was still hanging around even after her entrance exams had ended. Ayako cheerfully admitted that she had asked Takumi herself, because Miu still needed his help with school. Miu instantly protested that she did not need Takumi's help, while Takumi laughed and challenged that claim with playful confidence. As Ayako offered more fried chicken and declared she would open a new bottle, Takumi noticed what she was pouring, and his curiosity sharpened. Ayako all of a sudden remembered something, and her mood shifted like she had just uncovered hidden treasure. With pride, she revealed that the bottle was wine, presenting it like a special reward and clearly enjoying every second of it. Takumi hesitated and said it looked expensive, but Ayako brushed that aside like it was nothing and happily admired the aroma. Miu took a small sip and admitted it was delicious and fruity, sounding far more intrigued than cautious. She reached for another taste, but someone quickly stopped her and reminded her she was still in high school. Ayako refused to let Miu drink and insisted underage drinking was no joke, while Miu protested that she only wanted to know the taste, and Takumi awkwardly complained about his work being compared to fiction. As Miu kept struggling and grumbling that she did not want to be the only one left out, Takumi warned her to be careful when the glass nearly tipped. Then, the wine spilled all over Takumi, and Ayako froze in shock while he could only accept the accident with awkward resignation. The mood shifted in an instant as everyone fell silent and turned toward the mess. In Takumi's room, Miu apologized for causing trouble, but Takumi brushed it aside and said it was fine. Ayako noticed he still had a change of clothes there from the times he stayed over to tutor Miu, then calmly told him to use the shower while she washed the stained shirt. Then, wearing a playful smile, Ayako all of a sudden made an inappropriate joke about helping him clean up, and Takumi froze where he stood. She framed it as helping wash the wine off his back, but Takumi turned red and rejected the idea like it was completely absurd. Ayako only laughed and reminded him that she had helped take care of him a long time ago, which only made him more embarrassed. When Takumi protested that 10 years had passed since then, Ayako quietly chuckled, clearly enjoying how flustered he had become. Still smiling, she told him he could just leave the stained shirt there to soak, but the teasing did not end there. Takumi finally accepted the practical solution and started changing, without realizing how awkward the situation had become. Ayako all of a sudden froze at what she saw through the partly open door, and a small startled sound slipped out before she could stop it. Flustered and red-faced, she could not understand why accidentally seeing Takumi changing had shaken her that badly. She nervously told herself it was only an awkward accident, but her pounding heartbeat told a different story. Seeing how grown Takumi had become, Ayako realized he was no longer the child she remembered, and that realization unsettled her even more. Her mind flashed back to the days when a much younger Takumi used to follow her around, making the contrast hit even harder. Back at the table, Ayako rubbed her eyes and blamed the alcohol fumes for her sudden daze as sleepiness started closing in. Staggering toward the next room, she said she would brush her teeth and head to bed, leaving Miu and Takumi staring after her. Takumi noticed it was already past 10 and wondered whether it was really okay for him to still be there this late. Miu brushed the concern aside, saying he had kept her company long enough, while Takumi calmly pointed out that he had no curfew and lived right next door. With an eager grin, Miu insisted he did not need to worry, because she could handle her liquor just fine too. Ayako lightly smacked Takumi for letting something suspicious slip, then stared at him in amused disbelief as panic took over his face. While Takumi scrambled to explain, Ayako accused him of drinking before 20 and put on a dramatic show of scolding him for it. Still smiling, Ayako decided to let that little confession pass, and pretended she had heard nothing at all. With a soft, tipsy smile, Ayako said she could hardly believe Takumi had grown old enough to drink with her. Staring into her glass, Ayako wistfully murmured that time had flown by so fast, it made her feel like she had all of a sudden become an old aunt. Takumi pushed back at once and told Ayako she was not old at all, and the mood all of a sudden turned sincere. Ayako bashfully told him not to flatter her, though she accepted the compliment anyway and gently called him Takun. Takumi instantly denied he was flattering her, and the embarrassed force of it only made his feelings sound more real. Caught off guard, Ayako listened as Takumi insisted she was beautiful, kind, charming, and refined, and that was exactly why he had said it. After blurting it out, Takumi rose from his seat, and Ayako could only stare at him in stunned silence as his seriousness sank in. Still flushed from his sincerity, Ayako thanked Takumi and admitted he was the only one who ever said things like that to her. Then, smiling through her embarrassment, Ayako all of a sudden turned it around and eagerly asked whether he had a girlfriend. The moment she dragged him toward love talk, Takumi jolted and nervously asked why she wanted to know. Takumi awkwardly admitted he did not have a girlfriend. In fact, he had never had one. Ayako reacted with real surprise and said he seemed far too appealing for that, while Takumi tried to stay unfazed and told her not to sound so shocked. He explained that he had been confessed to a few times, especially in high school when he was on the swim team and even won a prefectural event, and Ayako proudly declared she had known he was popular. When Ayako pressed him on why he never dated any of them, Takumi admitted none of it had ever felt right. At that, Ayako leaned in with bright curiosity and directly asked if there was a girl he liked right now, and Takumi froze. The silence that followed, and Takumi's obvious reaction, made Ayako stare at him as the answer slowly revealed itself without a word. Excited by that clue, Ayako pressed harder and insisted he had to like someone, wondering why a healthy young man like him would not, and her breathless excitement showed she was desperate to know. Ayako all of a sudden leaped to a conclusion and whispered that he must have cared about that person for a long time, leaving Takumi sweating in silence. That thought sent Ayako into giddy overdrive as she imagined Miu proudly realizing Takumi was serious about someone, while she felt absurdly thrilled by the discovery. With nowhere left to run, Takumi admitted he had cared about that person for a very long time and could not imagine being with anyone else. Blushing hard, Ayako listened as Takumi confessed he was afraid to say anything because of their age gap, and because losing what they had would hurt too much if his feelings were not returned. Hearing how sincere and careful he was, Ayako felt overwhelmed and marveled inwardly at how earnest and innocent his feelings sounded. As she thought about the age difference, Ayako reasoned that 20 and 15 really could feel far apart, and that meant she was taking his fear seriously now. Then Ayako abruptly leaned in and told Takumi that age did not matter if two people truly cared about each other, shocking him with how forcefully she said it. Takumi nervously called her name, but Ayako pushed harder and insisted nothing would ever happen unless he clearly told that person how he felt. Flushed and fired up, Ayako rejected the idea that he had no chance, praised him as a wonderful boy, urged him to believe in himself, and declared there was only one thing left to do. With Takumi frozen in suspense, Ayako passionately told him to gather his courage, making it clear she wanted a confession right then. Driven into the corner by Ayako's pressure, Takumi finally blurted out that he was in love with her. Red-faced but steady, Takumi declared that he had loved Ayako for the past 10 years, and that feeling had never once changed. Ayako's mind completely short-circuited as she realized the confession was for her, not Miu, and the shock hit all at once. Overwhelmed by panic, Ayako bolted from the room as if running could undo what she had just heard. Miu rushed in at the commotion and quickly explained that she had only gotten up early to make breakfast, trying to calm the chaos before it got worse. Brushing it off, Miu said breakfast could just be cereal and lunch could be bought later, but she also pointed out that Ayako had stayed up late drinking with Takumi. That one remark made Ayako jolt, and she nervously claimed she barely remembered anything, even as she clearly wanted to erase it all. Takumi stayed flushed but firm, repeating his confession to Ayako as if he would not let her escape what he had finally said. Miu noticed Ayako turning bright red and asked what was wrong, piling even more pressure onto her. Ayako stood there frozen in humiliation as the confession and the misunderstanding spiraled further out of control. Frantically waving off concern, Ayako insisted she was fine, but her trembling voice gave away how badly she was rattled. The moment Takumi appeared and greeted her that morning, Ayako jolted in pure panic and nearly screamed at the sight of him. She stammered out an awkward greeting and blurted that she had not even noticed when he came in, while he calmly explained that he had tried ringing the doorbell first. As the moment caught up to her, Ayako became painfully aware of her sloppy appearance, and a fresh wave of embarrassment hit. Miyu looked at her like she was making too much of it and reminded her that Takumi had seen her in pajamas countless times, which only tangled Ayako's feelings further. Ayako tried to accept Miyu's logic, but a darker realization followed right away and sank straight into her chest. Watching Takumi stand there so calmly, Ayako realized with alarm that she was starting to see him differently, and that thought shook her even more. Unable to bear the tension, Ayako told Miyu to go on ahead without her, and Miyu agreed while clearly noticing the strange air between them. Once they were alone, Takumi pointed out that Ayako did not usually oversleep, gently drawing attention to just how unusual she was acting. Still blushing, Ayako admitted she had trouble falling asleep last night, making it obvious his confession had never left her mind. With a shy smile, Takumi admitted he had not slept at all either, proving she was not the only one shaken by it. He tried to say more to Ayako, but the heavy silence between them stopped him halfway. Flustered past her limit, Ayako rushed to suggest that they should both pretend last night never happened. She quickly argued that he had been drunk and had probably said things he did not really mean, leaving Takumi stunned. Takumi right away tried to stop her, insisting in a panic that he understood how she felt and wanted her to listen first. Laughing awkwardly to hide her panic, Ayako brushed it off and said she was old enough not to take drunk talk seriously. She kept up the forced cheerful act and repeated that they should just forget everything from the night before. Takumi urgently cut her off, trying to tell Ayako that if she did that, she would be throwing away something important to him. He admitted the alcohol had only given him the courage to say it, while Ayako demanded to know why he would say such things in the first place. With a firm look, Takumi said he meant every word and confessed again that he had always been in love with Ayako. Shaken to the core, Ayako could barely get out Takumi's name as he kept speaking with painful honesty. Takumi admitted that Ayako had probably only ever seen him as a clingy kid, and that he had tried many times to give up, yet his feelings never changed and he wanted them to truly try being together. Then he gently told her she did not need to answer right away, he only wanted her to seriously think about his confession. The instant he left, Ayako's legs gave out, and she collapsed as all that tension finally broke at once. Covering her mouth in shock, Ayako realized he had been completely serious, and that truth overwhelmed her. Later, Takumi told his friend Ringo Satoya that he had really confessed to Ayako, and Ringo nearly burst with excitement on the spot. Laughing at the whole situation, Ringo asked why Ayako was being treated like some unreachable ideal, teasing Takumi while he sat there in strained silence. Takumi admitted he had barely slept, and Ringo pointed out that since Ayako almost never missed lectures, her absence made everything feel even bigger. When Ringo bluntly said he really did love Ayako, Takumi reacted awkwardly, as if hearing it out loud still made him self-conscious. Then he confessed what had truly held him back, saying that being in love with his friend's attractive mother sounded like the kind of childish fantasy people usually outgrow, yet after 10 years his feelings were still just as strong. Ringo burst into teasing laughter and crudely guessed that Takumi had first noticed Ayako after some awkward household mishap, leaving him mortified and instantly defensive. Still grinning, Ringo said she was glad he had finally confessed no matter how it happened, then patted him proudly while he told her to stop treating him like a child. Takumi's mood darkened as he admitted he was afraid all he had done was make things even harder for Ayako. Ringo fell quiet for a moment, making it clear she understood exactly what he meant. Even so, Ringo told him that this was just what confessions were, one person throwing their heart into uncertainty and waiting to see what came back. Takumi then admitted he did not believe he and Ayako could ever go back to how things were before. He confessed that he could not endure the uncertainty anymore and was exhausted from never knowing where he stood. Looking across the room, Takumi finally gave his pain a voice, saying he was tired of being treated like a kid and crushed by the woman he loved refusing to see him as an adult. That evening, Miyu came home calling for her mother and casually asked what was for dinner. Instead, she found the house in total chaos and froze as Ayako lay collapsed in the middle of the wrecked room. Ayako stirred among the mess, dazed and sweating, and weakly recognized Miyu as she tried to push herself upright. The second she saw the time, Ayako panicked that dinner was already late, proving she was conscious but completely flustered. Miyu asked if Ayako was okay, and Ayako tearfully apologized before asking if they could just get takeout that night. As she scrambled to clean the ruined room, Ayako insisted nothing was wrong, but Miyu calmly pointed out that she had been acting strange all day. Then Miyu asked if something had happened with Takumi, and the question hit Ayako like a direct blow. Ayako jerked in panic and tried to play dumb, but the blush rushing across her face gave her away instantly. Forcing an awkward laugh, she said Miyu was saying strange things and insisted there was nothing to talk about. Miyu bluntly asked whether Takumi had confessed his feelings to her, and Ayako recoiled so hard she slipped and crashed back into the mess. Collapsing to the floor, Ayako trembled and groaned in embarrassment, while Miyu silently watched the reaction that answered everything. Miyu flatly noted that Ayako had panicked, and Ayako desperately denied it, insisting the fall had only been a slip. Miyu calmly concluded that Takumi really had confessed, while Ayako frantically insisted she had it all wrong and shook with embarrassment. Still flustered on the floor, Ayako all of a sudden realized Miyu had already known and stared at her in disbelief. Miyu casually admitted she had known for a long time that Takumi was in love with Ayako, saying it like it had always been obvious. That blunt answer stunned Ayako even more as Miyu added that Takumi had never been subtle about his feelings. While Ayako reeled in shock, Miyu bluntly suggested that Ayako either lacked confidence or had a huge blind spot whenever it came to Takumi. Ayako flushed bright red and protested that she was more than 10 years older than him, so she could not understand how she had failed to notice. Trying to see it from Takumi's side only made her spiral worse, because all she could see was herself as the older woman next door. Miyu let out a tired sigh and dryly agreed that Ayako did seem old to her, leaving Ayako frozen in awkward disbelief. Then, Miyu softened and pointed out that an age gap should not matter if two people truly cared about each other, except Ayako instantly insisted that logic could not apply to Takumi. Her own denial dried up the memory of Ayako passionately giving that exact same advice before, and the contradiction hit her hard. Ayako stared into space, stunned as the truth finally cornered her. She had really believed Takumi loved someone else. Miyu reminded her she had corrected her again and again, while Ayako could only stammer and resist, with nothing left to stand on. As Ayako desperately searched for an answer, Miyu pointed out that Takumi came to pick her up every single day because he wanted to see her. She kept piling on the proof, saying Takumi had been so eager to tutor her only because Ayako was the one who asked. Miyu pressed even harder, bringing up how Takumi stayed up all night caring for Ayako when she was sick, and insisted he did it out of love. That truth hit Ayako all at once, and she went completely still as it finally began to sink in. Lost in confusion, Ayako blurted out that Takumi liked her, only for Miyu to cut in and make it even heavier, he loved her. Curling in on herself from pure embarrassment, Ayako could barely think as Miyu calmly asked what she was going to do now. With a teasing smile, Miyu bluntly asked whether Ayako was going to date Takumi or not. Flushed and flustered, Ayako could only mumble that dating him was way too sudden for her to handle. Still red to the ears, Ayako tried to shut it all down, insisting Miyu did not need to worry about her or rush into marriage when she was only 15. Stretching lazily, Miyu said she would actually be happy if Ayako married Takumi, because having a cool young dad sounded great, and Ayako instantly spiraled. Ayako burst out in embarrassment and demanded that Miyu stop, insisting she was an adult and not someone to be toyed with like this. But Miyu all of a sudden turned serious and admitted she had always felt guilty, because Ayako had given up her 20s to raise someone else's child. She went even further, saying a wonderful woman like Ayako deserved to know love too, and that left Ayako speechless. When Miyu added that Ayako had given her whole life for her, Ayako cried out her name in shock. Overwhelmed, Ayako sank to the floor while Miyu stood over her, leaving those words with nowhere to run. Trembling, Ayako said she had never once seen Miyu as a stranger, and had never considered raising her a sacrifice. Through tears and panic, Ayako lunged forward and insisted it was the opposite, saying Miyu had no idea how much joy she had brought into her life. Clinging to Miyu, and the scene grows awkward with no easy escape. As Ayako kept crying into her, Miyu pushed her back and complained that she was tired of hearing the same emotional speech again. Miyu reminded Ayako that whenever she got drunk, she always started crying and repeating those heartfelt words. Even so, Ayako insisted Miyu could not deny how deeply she treasured her, and said she still had something important left to say. From the floor of the wrecked room, Ayako tearfully told Miyu that she truly saw her as her real daughter. That was enough to soften Miyu completely, and she told Ayako she wanted her to be happy just as much as Ayako had always wanted happiness for her. Then Miyu picked up her bag and, after thanking Ayako for always putting her first, asked her to finally put herself first for once. Lightening the mood, Miyu declared that she was going to change so they could head out for food together. As she ran upstairs, Miyu cheerfully called out that she was starving, leaving Ayako standing there in a daze. Watching her go, Ayako whispered Miyu's name in amazement, overwhelmed by how grown-up she all of a sudden sounded. Outside the house, Miyu excitedly shouted that they should go to the Italian place by the station, while Ayako quietly realized just how much Miyu had changed. Then Takumi's gentle confession rose back into Ayako's mind, and the memory set her face on fire all over again. In that memory, Takumi had calmly told her he did not need an answer yet and only wanted her to seriously think about it. Ayako remembered that ever since then, avoiding Takumi had felt nearly impossible. Even while telling herself Mew had already proven his feelings were real, Ayako froze when the doorbell rang, and Takumi called from outside. The second she realized it was time for Mew's tutoring and that Takumi had arrived early, panic slammed into her full force. Still completely unprepared, Ayako rushed downstairs calling for Mew, only to learn Mew was already out, leaving her alone with this. Horrified by the timing, Ayako realized she could not answer the door looking that disheveled. She frantically told herself that acting strange would only make things worse, especially after all the time she had greeted Takumi so casually before. From outside, Takumi tried to reassure her and asked her to just act like she always did, which only made her more flustered. Backed into a corner, Ayako forced herself to invite Takumi in while desperately trying to hold her embarrassment together. Ayako jolted the instant she realized Takumi had just seen her in a painfully awkward state. Sweating and red-faced, Ayako begged Takumi to wait, while he panicked at the doorway and called out to her in alarm. Holding a towel close around herself, Ayako desperately tried to explain that this was not what it looked like. Burning with embarrassment, Ayako admitted she had been cleaning the storage room, got sweaty, and had only just gone to wash up. Takumi, just as shaken, warned that she could not open the door looking like that, because it could have been someone dangerous. Trying to brush it off, Ayako told him not to worry and insisted no one would pay attention to an older woman like her. That self-mocking remark hit Takumi instantly, and he fired back without a second of hesitation. Gripping the door, Takumi told Ayako firmly that she was a beautiful woman. As the door shut, Takumi added in a quieter voice that at least one man there was genuinely glad to see her. Ayako froze in shock while Takumi bluntly admitted he could not stay calm because the woman he loved was standing right in front of him. Panicking over what Takumi might have thought, Ayako frantically insisted she had not meant to make things awkward while he hurried to say he already understood. Before the tension could settle, Mew all of a sudden peeked in with a sly grin and instantly sensed she had walked into something awkward. Ayako froze and desperately tried to deny it, while Mew cheerfully teased that things seemed to be moving surprisingly fast. Completely unfazed, Mew casually announced that she would stay in her room and told them to do whatever they wanted until tutoring time. As Mew headed upstairs, she added that Takumi could even skip the lesson for the day, and Ayako only got more mortified as she kept insisting this was not what it looked like. Once Mew was gone, Ayako could only groan in embarrassment while Takumi stood there speechless, still trying to catch up with what had just happened. After pulling himself together, Takumi nervously asked Ayako if she had told Mew about his feelings. Still flustered but a little calmer, Ayako admitted she had not, then realized Mew had probably figured it out long ago. Takumi awkwardly accepted that, scratching his head as he admitted it did make sense. He then confessed that he had never been good at hiding his feelings, and Ayako was left reeling at just how obvious his love had been. Still overwhelmed by everything, Takumi said he would head upstairs early and start Mew's lesson ahead of time. Before he could leave, Ayako nervously stopped him and asked if they could talk first, despite how obvious her embarrassment still was. Takumi right away told her to get dressed first, and Ayako flusteredly agreed. A little later, they sat facing each other in the kitchen, both tense as the silence between them grew heavier. As Ayako tried to serve tea, her hands shook so badly that even Takumi noticed how rattled she was. Forcing herself to focus, Ayako tried to sort through everything she had just learned. Face-burning, Ayako carefully confirmed that Takumi was in love with her. Takumi took the blunt question in stride and admitted she was getting right to the point. Then he answered without wavering and plainly confirmed that he really was in love with Ayako. After saying it that directly, Takumi covered his mouth in embarrassment as the full weight of the confession hit him. Ayako struggled to respond as she realized she had known Takumi for so long without ever noticing he blushed like this. Wanting to be certain before anything went further, Ayako asked what Takumi actually wanted to happen between them. Takumi answered without hesitation that he wanted a serious relationship with Ayako, and the moment becomes awkward and difficult to ignore. That word hit Ayako like a shock, and she could barely repeat it as her thoughts spun out of control. Ayako panicked and called Takumi crazy, while Takumi quickly realized she had taken it the wrong way and insisted he had not said it lightly. Still flustered, Ayako reminded him that she was more than 10 years older than him, and that Mew was part of this too. Takumi calmly said he already understood all of that, including the fact that Ayako was still a single mother. Then, with complete seriousness, he declared that he intended to accept Mew as his own daughter and build a life raising her together with Ayako. Takumi explained that he had wanted to tell Ayako all this only after he graduated and found work first. Ayako sat there stunned as she realized Takumi had not spoken on impulse at all. He had been quietly planning a future with her for years. Still reeling from what sounded like a proposal, Ayako quietly asked Takumi when he had first realized he liked her. Takumi answered casually that it had probably been about 10 years earlier, and that number hit Ayako like another blow. Ayako blurted out that he would have only been around 10 when they first met, and Takumi calmly confirmed it. Blushing, Takumi admitted that from the very first moment he had seen Ayako as the most important woman in his world and felt deeply attached to her. His words were so earnest, so sincere, and so overwhelmingly cheesy that Ayako could only lock up and burn with embarrassment. Then Takumi added that a memory from when they had once shared a bath long ago had stayed with him ever since, and he said it with bright conviction. The second he mentioned that bath, Ayako went completely rigid as the implication came crashing down. Flustered beyond reason, Ayako started repeating that they had taken a bath together once long ago, but Takumi desperately tried to stop her before she made it sound even worse. Ayako then nervously asked if that had been the moment Takumi started seeing her differently, leaving him stunned and sweating under the question. Takumi right away faltered, covered his mouth, and mumbled an uneasy denial as he struggled to answer her directly. Takumi froze and tried to deny it, but Ayako, already overwhelmed, started fearing his feelings really had become tangled up with that old memory. Ayako's thoughts raced back to that moment, and panic took over as she convinced herself he had taken it far more seriously than she ever realized. In tears and humiliation, Ayako accused Takumi of betraying her trust, while Takumi could only panic as the misunderstanding spun out of control. Takumi desperately defended himself and reminded Ayako that she had been the one who joined him in the bath back then, but that only made her more embarrassed. Ayako tearfully concluded that he had started seeing her differently even when he was just a child, and that thought left her shaking. Then, in total panic, Ayako blurted out a wildly specific complaint about what he had noticed, leaving Takumi horrified and begging her to stop before she embarrassed them both any further. Ayako lurched forward in flustered outrage and insisted that even at 10, Takumi had been looking at her with unusual seriousness, while he protested that she was the one making this unbearable. Trying to calm her down, Takumi awkwardly said that if it helped at all, things were not the way she was imagining. That only made Ayako cry out in frustration, but Takumi hurriedly explained that back then he had only understood the moment in a childlike, innocent way. After the chaos finally settled, Ayako apologized for losing control, and admitted that she now understood just how serious Takumi truly was. Ayako lowered her head and painfully told Takumi that she could not go out with him, and the words nearly broke her. She stayed bowed in shame, visibly struggling under the weight of what she had just said. Ayako explained that she was flattered, but she could not let him date an older woman like her, and begged him to understand. Still flustered, she insisted that the thought of them being together was simply too absurd to accept. Takumi challenged that instantly and asked why it had to be absurd. Ayako stumbled over her words and claimed it was just obviously ridiculous, but Takumi calmly replied that it was not obvious to him at all. Takumi told her that if she said she did not like him, or that she refused to date a college student, he would be hurt but still accept it. But he made one thing clear. He could not accept her treating his feelings like a joke. He reminded Ayako that she herself had once said an age gap did not matter if two people truly loved each other, and that sent her scrambling. Cornered by her own words, and the scene shifts into uncomfortable territory. Takumi right away caught that and pointed out that her excuse had changed from ridiculous to unrealistic, and he refused to let it slide. Ayako raised her voice and insisted this was not only about the two of them, warning that society, her future coworkers, and even Takumi's parents would judge them. When Ayako brought up his parents, Takumi paused and asked what they had to do with it, while she faltered under the weight of her fear. Clasping her hands tightly, Ayako admitted she owed Takumi's parents a great deal, and she knew he understood that already. She recalled how they had helped her again and again when she struggled to raise Miu after becoming a mother. Looking straight at him, Ayako reminded Takumi that he was their eldest son, and that was exactly why this mattered. With guilt written all over her face, she asked whether his parents could really approve of him dating a woman who already had a child after everything they had done for him. Takumi calmly said he understood why that would worry her, and for a moment it seemed like her words had finally reached him. Ayako was stunned when he added that saying marriage had nothing to do with his parents was probably the kind of naive thing a child would say. Then Takumi softly agreed that she was right and admitted once again that this had never been just about the two of them. Ayako quietly called to Takumi, her voice softening when she saw him accept her concerns. Fighting back tears, she admitted she was relieved and grateful that he had finally understood her point of view. After wiping her eyes, Ayako gently addressed Takumi again, as if she were about to settle everything for good. She said she had known he might be worried about his parents, and Takumi leaned in, unable to read where this was going. Then, Takumi all of a sudden brightened and proudly declared that he had already gotten his parents' approval. Ayako froze on the spot and could only stare at him, completely blindsided by what he had just said. Still smiling, Takumi insisted she did not need to worry anymore, and that only made the shock hit harder. Ayako erupted in disbelief, unable to process how casually he had just erased the obstacle she thought mattered most. A flashback showed a younger Takumi trembling in the rain, as Ayako found him outside and anxiously asked why he was out there in weather like that. He explained that his mother was working late and had given him the key, but he had forgotten it inside, leaving Ayako startled by his situation. Ayako hurried Takumi through the downpour under her umbrella and insisted he wait at her house instead of standing outside and getting sick, while he tried to protest. The rain kept pouring as she brought him inside without giving him any chance to argue. Once home, Ayako told Takumi she had prepared a bath and urged him to get changed, but he shyly insisted that was unnecessary. Ayako tugged at his soaked clothes and warned that he would freeze if he kept them on, while Takumi flusteredly insisted he could handle it himself. As Takumi panicked, Ayako casually pointed out that unsteady clothes were hard to remove alone, which only made him more embarrassed. Ayako noticed even his remaining clothes were drenched and said she would wash those too, leaving Takumi completely overwhelmed. While washing up, Takumi sighed and grumbled that Mama Ayako still treated him like a little child. Looking at himself, Takumi slipped into insecure thoughts and wondered if Ayako saw him as weak and unreliable. That train of thought snapped apart when Ayako all of a sudden appeared nearby, startling him so badly that he cried out. Takumi stared at Ayako in total shock and demanded to know why she was there, completely caught off guard by her sudden appearance. Ayako smiled right in front of him and teasingly asked if he did not want her there, keeping the tension painfully alive. Takumi flushed and hurried to deny it, insisting that was not what he meant at all, even as his panic kept rising. Ayako stayed beside him anyway and warmly told him it felt nice, leaving Takumi frozen in disbelief. As they sat together, Ayako noticed that Takumi looked up to her, and he admitted it openly. Takumi then remembered the funeral and explained that he had seen what happened there. In that memory, Ayako slammed her hand down and fiercely declared that she would take Miu in herself. Young Takumi watched from the doorway as Ayako faced the grieving adults and stepped forward without hesitation. Back in the memory, Takumi recalled that Miu had lost her parents, but Ayako had been the one who stayed by her side. The memory hit Ayako hard, and she broke down in tears as all the weight of that moment came rushing back. Takumi stared at her in shock and called out to Mama Ayako, shaken by her sudden tears. Ayako wiped her eyes, apologized for startling Takumi, and admitted with shame that she had made a serious mistake at work that day. Takumi could only stare in confusion as Ayako finally began to open up about what had been crushing her. Ayako confessed that she wished she could be someone dependable and wished she could handle everything perfectly. She explained that balancing work while raising Miu had been hard, and then she revealed the terrible thought that had crossed her mind. Ayako lowered her head and admitted she had wondered if she simply was not fit to be a mother. As Takumi listened in shock, Ayako tearfully confessed that she felt unworthy of being Miu's mother and deeply ashamed of herself. Through tears, Ayako insisted she had to become better both as a mother and as a person, because Miu depended entirely on her. Takumi all of a sudden reached for her and cut through her despair, telling her with urgent conviction that she was not alone. Flushed but resolute, he promised that she had him and swore he would be there for her. Ayako looked at him through tears as he vowed to protect her no matter how difficult things became. Still crying, Ayako leaned closer to Takumi and quietly pleaded with him, overwhelmed as she accepted the comfort he offered. Ayako let out a shaky laugh, and Takumi brightened as he said he already felt much better, making her realize his words had truly reached her. With tears still in her eyes, Ayako softly thanked him, her expression finally beginning to ease. Takumi remembered that until then he had treated Ayako like a saint and a hero, but in that moment he realized she was also a vulnerable woman carrying everything alone. Because of that realization, Takumi decided he wanted to become a man strong enough to protect her. During that memory at a family restaurant, Ayako teasingly concluded that seeing her in such a fragile and unguarded state had pushed Takumi to change, while he flusteredly denied that was the whole reason. As the flashback continued, Takumi recalled another moment when Takumi's mother all of a sudden greeted Ayako in the neighborhood. Ayako turned in surprise and politely greeted her back, while Takumi's mother casually asked whether the market was still running a big meat sale. The moment takes an uncomfortable turn. As Tamami kept smiling and asked about Miu and mentioned her own husband's recent promotion, Ayako forced a polite smile and nervously thought that staying close with the neighbors might become unavoidable. Ayako nervously addressed Tomomi and hesitated, clearly struggling to bring up Takumi. Fidgeting under the pressure, Ayako awkwardly admitted that what she wanted to discuss was Takumi. Tomomi right away realized Takumi had confessed to Ayako, and Ayako jolted in shock as she wondered how Tomomi already knew. Tomomi calmly explained that she had suspected something after Takumi came home acting different after his birthday, which made Ayako blush even harder. Panicking, Ayako hurried to insist that she had turned Takumi down because she felt she was not good enough for him. She then desperately argued that the whole thing made no sense and could never work. Instead of answering directly, Tomomi gently shifted Ayako's attention to the bright blue sky, leaving her confused into silence. As Ayako looked up, Tomomi revealed that she had understood Takumi's feelings for the past 10 years. Tomomi reminded Ayako of the rainy day when young Takumi was locked out of the house and Ayako was the one who took care of him. She added that Takumi himself told them about that day when they came home, making it clear his feelings had begun long ago. Tomomi revealed that when Takumi was little, he had already declared that he wanted to marry Ayako someday, and that left Ayako stunned. With a gentle sigh, Tomomi said they had dismissed it as childish talk back then, while Ayako blushed hearing how far back it all went. Tomomi then explained that something in Takumi truly changed after that rainy day. She recalled how Takumi stopped being picky with food, took studying more seriously, and even started swimming despite not liking sports before. Tomomi admitted she had expected him to eventually fall for someone his own age, but instead he kept pushing himself for 10 whole years because he wanted to become worthy of Ayako. Hearing that all of it came from love, Ayako could only stand there in shaken silence as the truth finally landed. As Ayako froze at the sink, Tomomi gently clarified that this did not mean Ayako had to return Takumi's feelings, and she even tried to lighten the mood by saying rejection could build character. But Tomomi added that if Ayako did care about him that way, then she wanted Ayako to be honest about it. Bowing deeply, Tomomi said that if Ayako truly felt that way, then she was willing to trust her with her son. That earnest plea hit Ayako hard, leaving her staring ahead in breathless confusion. Tomomi cheerfully teased that Ayako had practically won her boyfriend's mother's approval, while Ayako was reminded that being older and already raising Miu should normally have made this far harder. Back at home, Miu bluntly asked why Ayako and Takumi were still not dating, and Ayako insisted there was no way they could be together. Ayako argued that love and marriage were far more complicated than Miu seemed to think. Miu fired back that Ayako had never even been married, catching her off guard and shutting the argument down on the spot. Ayako tried to regain control and insisted that the real issue was something else entirely. She declared that Takumi was simply confused and still trapped in the fantasy of his first childhood crush. Convinced that dating her would only end in disappointment for him, Ayako decided the sooner he faced that reality, the better. With forced determination, Ayako resolved to shatter Takumi's ideal image and make him dislike her, while Miu could only stare at how extreme her plan sounded. Ayako then swore to open Takumi's eyes to what life with a woman over 30 was really like. Right after that vow, Takumi appeared and awkwardly addressed Ayako, explaining that Miu had asked him to bring her something to drink. The second Takumi stepped in, Ayako put her first plan into motion and hurriedly drained her drink right in front of him, forcing the act to begin. Already flushed, she leaned on him far too casually and tried to paint herself as a woman with a serious drinking problem, one he couldn't ignore. Takumi froze, asked if she was all right, and realized she had nearly finished the whole bottle by herself, and that only made him more concerned. Ayako pressed the lie harder, claiming she had been hiding how much she really drank, determined to destroy the image he had of her. She pushed even further, saying that when work went badly, she drank herself senseless, stayed out until morning, or even got herself into dangerous situations, making her life sound as alarming as possible. Takumi doubted her right away, and his quiet disbelief sent panic through Ayako because her strategy was already crumbling. Desperate to sound convincing, Ayako started blurting out random examples of what she drank, but Takumi's face made it obvious she was only exposing how fake the whole act was. Takumi casually corrected yet another sloppy claim, and Ayako grew even more flustered as he saw straight through her. Cornered and burning with embarrassment, Ayako raised her voice and insisted none of that mattered, that she simply drank a lot, no matter what. Takumi cut through the performance at once, pointing out that she had only recently started drinking again, and Ayako slumped as her first escape route collapsed. Takumi reminded Ayako that she once said she quit drinking so she could always drive if Miu ever got sick or hurt, a memory he hadn't forgotten. He added that when her father had tried to offer her a drink before, she had turned it down without hesitation. Ayako awkwardly admitted that his memory was disturbingly good, better than she wanted right now. Takumi smiled and confessed that he had always paid close attention to every word Ayako said, and that only made her blush harder. Completely flustered, Ayako tried to retreat to her room, but in her haste, her footing gave out. As she swayed, Takumi caught her at once, and Ayako shakily insisted she was fine even while admitting she was a little tipsy, not nearly convincing enough. Seeing how unsteady she was, Takumi quietly excused himself as he reached out to help her properly. Before Ayako could even react, Takumi picked her up to keep her from falling, and the sudden closeness stunned her silent. Ayako panicked and demanded to know what he was doing, while Takumi softly apologized instead of putting her down. Takumi gently explained that she looked too unsteady and said he would carry her to her room instead, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ayako hurriedly denied being heavy, but being carried by Takumi at her age sent her into such a panic that she kipped and nearly made everything worse. She tried to take control of the moment and failed completely. The second she regained herself, Ayako forced her mind toward a new plan and decided her second strategy would be acting like a reckless shopaholic. She told herself Takumi would definitely hate a woman who threw money away on useless luxury. In her head, Ayako pushed the role to the extreme, imagining herself obsessed with expensive designer bags and certain that this would finally make Takumi lose interest. But the instant she saw a handbag priced at 255,200 yen, her hand stopped over the purchase button and started trembling. Ayako broke on the spot, staring in horror that one bag cost over 200,000 yen and that some were over $1 million, enough money to feed them for months. After nothing more than browsing the listings, she collapsed in exhaustion and admitted she felt drained just from looking at those bags. She shut the laptop and reminded herself she could never waste money like that, not when she had to save for Miyu and for Miyu's future. Even then, Ayako refused to surrender and, with nowhere left to retreat, declared she would bet everything on a third strategy aimed directly at Takumi. Still desperate to drive him away, Ayako called Takumi to the living room, and he right away sensed something was wrong while she regretted this third plan even as it began. As Takumi turned toward her voice, he called out to Ayako in confusion. Ayako rushed in and dramatically demanded to know whether he had been looking for her, forcing the confrontation into motion. Then, she launched into an absurdly over-the-top transformation act, presenting herself like a flashy heroine in one last attempt to shatter his image of her. Wearing a gaudy costume, and the situation shifts into territory no one prepared for. Instead of hiding it, she declared that this was the real her and confessed she was a hardcore Love Kaiser fan who collected the toys and costumes and rewatched every new episode again and again each week. Right in the middle of her act, part of the costume came loose, and her confidence cracked instantly. As Ayako panicked over the wardrobe mishap, Takumi covered his face in stunned silence while a mascot-like explanation revealed that Love Kaiser was a magical girl anime aimed at young girls. Ayako sniffled in humiliation and blamed the costume for not fitting right, convinced this disaster had finally finished her. But through all that embarrassment, she admitted the real reason she got into the show. She started watching it with Miyu because she wanted something the two of them could share, and that truth made the moment sting even more. Ayako desperately insisted that Takumi was never supposed to see this side of her, then confessed she had gotten far more obsessed than she ever intended after first watching it for Miyu's sake. She tried to prove just how deep the obsession went by passionately naming a character and dramatically explaining the tragic plot, hoping the intensity alone would make Takumi step back. Instead, Takumi reacted with startled interest, realizing the children's show dealt with unexpectedly serious themes, and that only threw Ayako off more. Ayako remembered how it all began, excitedly showing Miyu the series and its merchandise as she tried to share that little world with her. In that memory, Ayako happily sang along to the theme song and watched beside a tiny Miyu, treasuring those simple days more than she realized. A few years later, Ayako was still calling Miyu over in excitement, while Miyu, older now, sleepily made it clear she no longer wanted to watch with her. Back in the present, Ayako forced a self-mocking laugh and said Takumi could laugh too, since she was just an older woman watching anime alone now. Takumi calmly looked at the costume itself, and pointed out that it was a Love Kaiser solitaire outfit, being held together with a safety pin. Then he added that even after 10 years, the transformed heroine and that form were still hugely popular, leaving Ayako confused by how seriously he was taking this. Takumi kept going without hesitation, saying the heroine still got new merchandise and had even appeared in a movie last summer, proof he knew far more than Ayako expected. Ayako lit up at once and eagerly agreed, then launched into how the movie had Hiyumi's appearance and how adorable she was, even admitting she cried in the theater. Takumi matched her excitement right away, adding that the original voice actress returned for the role, and the two shared an excited high-five as Ayako squealed that she loved that part too. That burst of shared excitement made Ayako freeze, and she abruptly demanded to know why Takumi knew so much about any of this. With awkward honesty, Takumi admitted he watched Love Kaiser every week and had even seen the movie himself, leaving Ayako completely stunned. Takumi then explained that he had known for a while that Ayako liked Love Kaiser, and her shock only deepened. When Ayako nervously asked how he found out, Takumi said Miyu complained about it constantly and had told him Ayako secretly did cosplay and collected merchandise. Ayako was crushed that Miyu had exposed her deepest secrets, while the memory showed Miyu grumbling that Ayako kept dragging her to movies and events she never wanted to attend. Collecting himself, Takumi said he checked the series out because of that, and added that he was already a big anime and manga fan anyway. Takumi admitted he first assumed it was just another kid's anime, but once he started it, he found it genuinely interesting and kept going. He finished by saying that before long he had become a huge fan too, and Ayako could only stare at him in disbelief. Takumi smiled and said, Love Kaiser really was a great kids show, with deeper themes and surprisingly serious episodes, and Ayako was shaken that after all her hiding, he accepted both her and her odd hobby without hesitation. As Takumi stayed close without a trace of ridicule, Ayako stiffened and realized he was sincerely interested in the things she loved instead of judging them. Noticing the item in Ayako's hands, Takumi recognized it as the Solitario transformation device, and Ayako hesitantly confirmed it. He right away identified it as the expensive, limited edition replica, worth around 50,000 yen, proving his knowledge ran even deeper than she thought. Ayako blurted out that it was made for adults, and that was why it had premium quality. But her embarrassment was already starting to turn into excitement. She explained that the makers had recreated every tiny detail so perfectly that it looked exactly like the one from the show, and Takumi agreed in amazement. Striking a dramatic pose, Ayako declared it her trump card as her confidence came surging back through their shared enthusiasm. Takumi instantly recognized the line as one from Solitario's episode 36, and his excitement made Ayako beam at how perfectly he got the reference. Now completely carried away, Ayako happily explained that the device could play all kinds of the characters' lines along with songs and other tracks from the series. The two sat together on the couch testing the sounds, and while the toy blared Love Kaiser lines and music, Takumi calmly called it very cool, leaving Ayako quietly overwhelmed by how naturally close they had become. Ayako excitedly insisted the replica was absolutely worth 50,000 yen, and when Takumi smiled and agreed, she let out a squeal of pure relief. Growing bolder, Ayako asked if Hiyumi was Takumi's favorite Love Kaiser character. Takumi admitted Hiyumi was one of his favorites, but said his top choice had changed several times, and Ayako eagerly jumped in to say she ended up choosing Hiyumi too. Ayako launched into an intense explanation of why Love Kaiser Joker was a masterpiece, praising its dark elimination concept and insisting Hiyumi's role was unforgettable. Takumi passionately agreed and said Hiyumi was amazing, especially because she started as a calm lone wolf before revealing how deeply she cared about her friends. Caught up in the discussion, Takumi grabbed Ayako's arm in excitement and pointed out that Hiyumi even joined the dark side halfway through the story, while Ayako agreed with all her strength. Ayako stared wide-eyed as that scene rushed back to her, and she emotionally stressed that Hiyumi fell into darkness and was thrown into utter despair. Clutching the transformation device, Ayako went on that Hiyumi fought her way back toward the light, her passion now impossible to hide. Takumi said that in that moment Hiyumi had looked perfect, and Ayako, overwhelmed by how deeply he understood, admitted he completely got it and that the scene had been beautiful. As the excitement began to settle, Takumi happily declared that Solitaria was the coolest and said talking about her made him want to watch the entire series again, while Ayako sat beside him in stunned, growing warmth. Still flushed from excitement, Ayako insisted Takumi absolutely had to watch it because she even owned the full Blu-ray box set. Getting swept away, Ayako almost offered to lend it to him, then quickly changed course and eagerly suggested a movie marathon at her house instead. When Takumi agreed right away and even added that there should be snacks, Ayako burst with joy and said she never imagined they would watch Love Kaiser together. But the moment cracked when her outfit slipped out of place, and Ayako shrank in embarrassment while awkwardly admitting she probably needed the costume in a bigger size. Even so, pushing through that humiliation, Ayako asked if he would go see this year's Love Kaiser movie with her, because going alone at her age felt embarrassing, and she would feel far better if he came too. Takumi happily said he would love to, and with both of them smiling brightly, the invitation became a real promise. Then, in the very next instant, Ayako collapsed over the table in total defeat just as Miyu arrived and saw the aftermath. Still reeling, Ayako weakly asked how things had ended up like this when Miyu had always mocked her for liking Love Kaiser. In her memory, Miyu coldly told her to stop dragging her into Love Kaiser stuff and said Ayako could enjoy whatever hobby she wanted on her own. Miyu had also complained that she was not interested, and that Ayako never listened, insisting she only acted that way because being forced into it made her miserable. Miyu walked in calmly to grab something for her child, and remarked that there were only so many times she could keep repeating herself. As she opened a snack without the slightest concern, Miyu bluntly asked whether Ayako basically had Takumi all to herself now. Caught off guard, Ayako faltered and admitted she did not even know how to answer that. While eating in front of her, Miyu pointed out that Ayako's plan to make Takumi hate her was clearly falling apart. Miyu added that from everything she had heard, Ayako and Takumi seemed to be getting even closer, and Ayako panicked inside because Miyu was completely right. Thinking back on how natural everything had felt with Takumi, Ayako realized with alarm that the two of them really had grown closer. Even so, Ayako tried to rally herself and insisted she still had plenty of ways to keep resisting, refusing to surrender just yet. Miyu cut straight through that bluff and asked when Ayako was finally going to stop running from her own feelings. The question froze Ayako where she sat, staring at Miyu without any answer. All Ayako could do was blink in stunned confusion, shaken by how completely Miyu had seen through her. Miyu brushed aside Ayako's silence and coldly warned that if Ayako insisted on acting like this, she would start making plans of her own, and the warning hit hard. When Miyu turned to leave, Ayako could only stare in speechless shock, her panic spiraling as she realized Miyu was prepared to take matters into her own hands.